Hello and welcome to the Sunday Morning Cornerman. The Sunday Morning Cornerman is part of the Cageside Press Podcast Network. This week on the SMC, we will discuss all the relevant fights of UFC 236, Holloway vs. Poirier 2. I will do all this with the co-host of the SMC, Keith Shillan, who can be read on SureDog, Fansided, and Cageside Press, and listened to on the Loudmouth MMA Network. Keith, how are you?
I'm good, brother. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. I got a lot to talk about, man. Great night of fights last night. So, Keith, the UFC came back to Atlanta for its fourth fight on Saturday night, and most were only really expecting the smoke from the main and co-main events. When this fight was announced, or when this card was announced, what do you think we were getting?
Well, I thought we were getting a top-heavy card. I think that's actually what we got anyways. But, yeah, that's the co-main event and the main event I was excited about, and the rest of the card was very shallow, nothing that really stands out. I mean, if you go from a ranking standpoint, I think the only other ranked opponents we had was Wilson Hayes and Alexander Pantoja, who are ranked in the flyweight division, the division that is pretty much dead in the UFC. So from a ranking standpoint, we didn't really have much. Oh, no, Krylov and St. Preux, they were also ranked. But, I mean, still, you had, 4 matchups with ranked opponents and nothing else going on. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not the most excited from top to bottom, but I was excited for the co-main event and the main event, and they obviously delivered.
All right, well, let's get started. Let's talk about the prelims first. Brandon Davis defeated Randy Costa by submission via rear naked choke, 112 of round number 2. What'd you see in this one?
I mean, I seen a fighter that has tons of potential in Randy Costa who should never been in the UFC. Just because he may be able to beat lower-level UFC fighters at this point, this guy was 4-0 with less than 3 minutes of professional fight time in his career. I live in New England. I'm familiar with Randy Costa. I like him, and I like his story. But I don't like his management. I don't think his management is doing a good job with him. I think some managers, they want to get a fighter in the UFC, and that's the end game. The end game should try to be get a UFC champion. That should be the end game with the fighter, or be as successful as he possibly can. And take an early loss to Brandon Davis. Now he's probably going to get another fight in the UFC. He's probably going to be overmatched again, and he's going to lose a fight. And I think it would have been better if he spent time seasoning on the regional scene, places like CES and Reality Fighting and Cage Titans and all these. If you saw the fight, I don't know if you watched it. He had really good moments. He had Brandon Davis rock. Brandon Davis is a good fighter. He had him rocked a couple times, but then the experience took over. And when the difference between when Brandon Davis was hurt, he didn't panic, and the first time Randy Costa was hurt, he panicked, and then Brandon Davis finished the fight. And that's from Brandon Davis being in those situations by having so many professional fights and being there before, not panicking. And Randy Costa did, and that cost him the fight.
Let's talk about, because we like to take some diversions here and there when we do these, and not to get too far off the path, because we've got a lot of fights to talk about. But when you talk about, so one of the knocks on a guy like John Calipari, right, is that he decided my job is now to get fighters to the NBA. So whether or not they won championships or not was irrelevant. So when you say his management is more about getting fighters to the UFC, do you think that they should be taking smaller client bases? Like, what do you think? Like if I have 20 fighters, I can't do as much for them as if I had 10. Like, what's the answer to that?
Well, I don't know if that is. I just mean more the difference between and John Calipari and NCAA basketball coaches is if he gets a guy to the NBA, that guy's going to be set for life. Randy Costa making it to the UFC is not set for life. I mean, he's not even going to be a full-time fighter right now. He probably works at a gas station or something,
Right.
That's why you can't compare these two sports. I mean, if you get a guy from Kentucky or Connecticut or wherever and you get them to get in the NBA, even if he's the worst player in the league, he's still set for life.
Right, and I guess the comparison also falls flat because so these managers, if they do that, are setting themselves for life. Meaning they have 20 fighters. The more fighters they get to the UFC, the more fighters want to sign with them, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it says more about them. I also think the teams too behind it. So the management and the teams. And I believe in this case, his manager, I think is Joe Lozon, his coach, which looks even worse. Joe's been around UFC. He was a guy who actually kind of got probably rushed in the UFC himself. But you kind of wish they'd say, hey, I'm going to say no to this UFC. I know it's hard to when Nick Maynard calls or Sean Selby calls to say no with this golden opportunity. But he's not ready. You only have 3 minutes of professional time. I mean, that's not even a full round. And I would like to see teams stop counting how many guys they have in the UFC and then just try to do what's best for the fighter in the long run. And I don't think that's what's happened with Randy Costa so far.
All right, let's move on.
He's got a lot of potential.
Let's move on. Pauliano Botello defeated Lauren Mueller by unanimous decision, 29-28 all the way around. What about this one? Anything there?
Yeah, I mean, this is just your classic UFC put the two hot chicks against each other matchup. That's the one we got in the card. But the whole fight changed about midway through the first round when Botello landed a beautiful kick to the body, hurt Mueller. Mueller really didn't recover until the third round, but at that point, Botello had 2 rounds in the bag. Mueller came on strong in the third round. She just ran out of time, and she lost 2 rounds to 1.
Next, Montel Jackson defeated Andrei Sukmanov by unanimous decision, 30-26, 30-27, 29-27.
Say that name again.
Oh, I knew you were going to call me out, and I tried to rush it, and I knew you were going to get me. Sukhamthov. No? Sukmanov?
Andrei Sukmanov. It's weird because he trains in my hometown, and I've talked to him many times, and it's pronounced, so it's Sukhamthot, he said to me.
Sukhamthot.
The only way the ending I don't think should be pronounced right, but I don't think you can really get his name wrong. It's just one of those. If your name's like that, whatever.
they all like to take the attempt, right? Yeah. As long as you're trying. It's one of those things when you pronounce, like sometimes you'll speak another language to someone who speaks it fluently, and they just kind of smile at you and they go, "All right, I see you're trying. Thanks." What'd you see in this one?
I seen all respect to my hometown hero Andrei Sukhamthot. He's a card filler, as I call him. He's never going to be a true challenger to a title. He's good enough to be in the UFC, but there's also 100 guys in his division who's just as good as him who's not in the UFC. And Montel Jackson looks like a legit prospect. He looks like a guy. This is the guy who's only been training MMA for 2 years, which is crazy. He's big. He's strong. He's got long arms. He mixes in his wrestling well. He was really striking. He was winning the striking battle with Sukhamthot, which is always a good thing, good sign, because that's what Sukhamthot's known for. And Jackson just had his way with him, and this was kind of like a catch 'em fight for Jackson, where he came in as one of the biggest favorites. He's coming off a win over Brian Keller, probably a better fighter than Sukhamthot, and everyone expected Jackson just to cruise, and he did. So sometimes you get these catch 'em fights where they think they're going to cruise and they lose especially in a young career, and that didn't happen yet for Jackson. I like Jackson. I mean, when you see what he's doing in only 2 years training. And what I would like to see him, he trains with Zach Otto's team, and all respect to Zach Otto there in Milwaukee. Dude, you got Duke Rufus's team. We got one of the best teams in the world in your city, man. Like, you could be training with Ben Askren and the Pettis brothers and Tyron Woodley and Paul Felder, and dude, I think this guy's the limit for Montel Jackson. Go join that team. And congratulations to Andrei Sukhamthot one more time, showing if there was any debate on who has the worst fight IQ after he lost 2 split decisions where he gave away both fights that he was probably going to win, and then he had that terrible what the hell did he do against Sean O'Malley? When O'Malley had a broken leg and all he had to do is make him stand up and decide to grapple. Sukhamthot decides to grapple again when he's down 2 rounds to nothing, when all he needs a knockout, and he decides to grapple instead. So. Sukhamthot is making sure nobody steals that title of worst IQ in MMA.
Let it never be said that Keith Shillan is afraid to call out hometown guys. He's like, listen, no. I call it like I see it. So,
if you see me next week with a black eye, Andre has found me.
So, yeah, what's interesting about you saying that, because obviously I'm from a big city here in Phoenix, and for a while we had like 3 really big gyms. Now it's pretty much just 2 bigger gyms. It was AZ Combat Sports for a while. Bader had a gym, and I noticed there was some guys who really played the politics well. It's a weird when you have a city with a couple of gyms, because on the one hand, if you're playing the underdog, it's like us against the world, and you start to make some enemies along the way. And I wonder if there's like any
they
anything
got that
with Rufus Sport, or I wonder if there's like a backstory there.
It might be. Like, I know Tim Means in Nico Montana does that with the Finn NHB, where they're in Albuquerque, which obviously you have Jax Winklejohn, one of the greatest teams of all time. And you have that thing. What I really found weird was they talked about Sukumit's strategy, that he's been training for years with Hard Knocks 360 down in Florida. You're talking about Henry Hoof. You're talking about Kamaru Usman, Robbie Lawler, Rashad Evans, Vitor Bell. I mean, legends of the sport. The current welterweight champion. There's other guys I'm forgetting about. Michael Johnson. And then he says he trains year-round there, but when he has a fight camp, he decides to come up to Pawtucket, Rhode Island, which is the gym is in a little warehouse and I'm not saying this is I'm a police officer in this city, in Pawtucket. It is like the number one crime in the state. It is a crack-infested, heroin-infested area, especially this area. This is where that warehouse is where people pick up their prostitutes. That's where we find stolen cars abandoned, or where we find just junk cars abandoned. It's not a nice area, and he decides to leave one of the best teams in the world to go train in Pawtucket, with his main training partners being like Dennis Paiva,
right,
and Cody Norby, and like guys who don't do this full time, guys who aren't world class, guys who aren't Kamaru Usman.
Right.
So
it's kind of like, before I train, I'm going to go to my gym and like stab holes in all my punching bags. I'm going to go ahead and, leave my wraps out over, it seems like he's sort of stacking the deck against himself a little bit when he doesn't have to.
Yeah. And I don't want to diss like small teams, because Keith Jeffrey and Pete Jeffrey, who own that gym, they're really good people. But you are limited to what you have. You're limited with the athletes you have. You're limited with the train. I mean, you're limited. You're not Hard Knocks 360. No, right. Obviously, small gyms work for some people, but they're the outliers. It's like when people say, "Oh, Randy Costa only." He had more time as a professional than John Jones said. Yeah, but John Jones is the outlier. You don't use that. Like,
as the metric,
that example. Yeah, and people always do that. I don't know.
All right, let's move on.
I'm gonna get beat up by the whole gym.
I know, right? Yeah.
Jeez.
It's a good thing you got the police force behind you talking all this shit.
Yeah, Greg Rebello's gonna get another knockout.
All right, let's move on to the section where I like to call for casuals that guy section. If the TV's on, they go, "Oh, I know that guy," but they don't know what his name is. Bilal Muhammad defeated Curtis Millender by unanimous decision, 29-27, 29-27, 30-26. This is where we start to see a little bit of face recognition, if not name recognition, for everyone. What'd you see in this one?
Well, I got a big beef with anybody who says that they recognize Muhammad but don't remember his name. I mean, he tells you remember the name, Bilal Muhammad. This was a great fight. This was one of the fights that I was really excited about. I thought it was a great stylistic matchup. Both guys obviously having avenues to win. Bilal Muhammad is so mentally tough. I mean, when you talk about a guy who trains and takes fights during Ramadan, he's a Muslim fighter, and he can't eat and drink during, I think, sun up to sundown, and he still does camps. I mean, that's insane. It's hard enough to do camps as it is. Never mind do something like that. And he broke Curtis Millender in this fight. It was a back and forth. Millender is humongous. He's welterweight. He looks like he's a freaking heavyweight. He was having moments. He was kind of picking him apart from the seat, but Muhammad had his game plan. He was going to stay in the face of Millender, keep making him fight off his back foot, throwing combination. I thought he did very well in the stand-up for what he could with someone as big as Millender, and then he set up timed takedowns. And when he got one takedown, he broke Millender. And halfway through the second round, when he got his first takedown, when Millender didn't pop up immediately, and he kind of controlled him for the rest of the round, Millender was done. And really, really good performance, in my opinion, by Bilal Muhammad. And now Millender is a guy who came in with a lot of hype, a guy that people are really big on. He just got smoked by Selesky, just lost Muhammad. He needs a change. And what I think one of his changes should be, well, I'm going to say it again, is a guy who doesn't train with a big camp. He should go to a big camp. But also, I think he needs to move up, because he was started to gas out in this fight, and I understand he wants to be the biggest guy in the weight class, but sometimes get the extra oxygen in. We've seen it so many times. Move up in weight. He might be better off moving up to middleweight, which in my opinion is probably an easier weight class already a shallower weight class than welterweight is right now anyways. So I think that should be the move for Millender.
Let's talk about the camp move, because obviously Muhammad's a Rufus Sport guy. Do you think that when guys are equal – first, let me ask you, how close do you think these guys are talent-wise?
I actually think raw talent. I actually think Millender has more. I mean, his skills, his physical skills. I don't have his numbers, his reach and his length and all this, but he's humongous. He's got these long arms. He's built like he's built like a Marvel Comics superhero character. He's like if the Avengers just brought in Curtis Millender and gave him a role as fire guy. Like, I don't follow Marvel, but like that would.
That was close.
Like he could fit right. He could roll right. He could roll right into the role. He has a physique. He has the look. When he enters the cage and his coach slaps him and he screams and like does this like flex. It's scary. Like how. If I was going to face him, I'd be like, holy Christ, look at this guy. But
I guess the larger point that I'm making is that when you see. Can you see, because I can see this sometimes, can you see as a fight progresses, the fight starts and these guys are pretty even, and then as the coaches come in after the first, you can see where the coaching makes a difference.
Sure. Yeah, totally. We've seen that a million times. Some coaches like Trevor Whitman, I think, is fantastic. And I think Greg Jackson is a guy who's always been good at motivating guys, little things like that. I don't know who Millender is with, but could you – so – He's got great striking ability, great talent. But he's got a hole in cardio and a hole in – and I think the cardio is because he should go up in weight class, but a hole in wrestling. Well, imagine he's from California. Imagine if he jumped over to AKA and was training with Daniel Cormier and maybe even Cain Velasquez. Or maybe if he went to the Body Shop and he was training with the Antonio McKee and AJ McKee and Aaron Pico and Joey Davis and all these – high-level wrestlers. Imagine what that would do for his career instead of training with guys that we'd never heard of.
Right. All right, let's move on. This is where I thought things started to pick up a little bit. Max Griffin defeated Salim Imadaev by majority decision, 29-27, 29-27, 28-28. I thought this was a really great fight. I really liked – what I said – my takeaway from this was that Griffin just fought a really professional fight. And we talk about that a lot. It's sort of just finding the victory, finding the path to victory. What'd you see in this one?
Yeah, I think you saw another veteran who made Griffin. I know the broadcast brought this up. Griffin looked like a completely different person, and physically, like he looked like he put on weight. And he looked kind of chubby, as chubby as a welterweight could look. Obviously, still in good shape for a normal person, but he looked different physically. I don't like that. I think he should go get that extra weight off. I don't know if that was something they decided when him and Imadaev has trained together, and maybe there's something where he thought he could be physically stronger. He came out wrestling a lot more, so maybe that's why he had the extra weight on. I think that actually backfired him because I thought Griffin gassed out pretty hard. I thought both guys kind of gassed out hard. The only thing I saw is I saw Griffin dig deep where Imadaev didn't. And then going back to what we talked about Slickwood, I saw a terrible fight IQ by Imadaev. He kept going for these. He was gassing out and still trying these high level moves like spinning attacks. And every single time he spun, when he was making his way through, Griffin closed the distance and turned into a wrestling match. And that just to me was just poor game plan. I thought Griffin had his game plan. He stuck to it, and that's why he won. I thought it was the correct decision. It was really close. It's funny. I actually scored it a draw, but if anybody would get the win, I thought Griffin did, especially when you have the cage grab where they had the point taken off for Imadaev. Did you see about Brett Akamoto's tweet though about this fight?
No.
So guess these guys used to train together at Extreme Couture, and Imadaev got kicked out of Extreme Couture because he was hurting training partners. But he's one of these guys where, hey, we're going to do light sparring, and he's throwing spinning back elbows, trying to knock guys out. And I guess him and Griffin it happened to Griffin, and they had some problems. But I guess during this, so I guess Imadaev was really upset with getting kicked out of that gym or whatever. There's been bad blood between these two, and Imadaev multiple times tried attacking Griffin at the Fighters Hotel, and the police got called during the week. It said that's what Brett Akamoto tweeted out during the fight or right after the fight. So
yeah, didn't you tweet something out about that too? About Imadaev? I want to say maybe I'll check into it. I thought you tweeted like the guy was maybe it was somebody else. Tweeted that he was a scumbag.
I tweeted screw that guy.
There you go.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
but listen.
He's cheating. He was holding the cage. He's trying to knock guys out in training. I mean, you hear. I mean, you know who was famous for? Well, or supposedly famous for that was T.J. Dillashaw. And look what happened. What's his name? Chris Holdsworth. Supposedly T.J. Dillashaw gave Holdsworth such a bad concussion. A guy that was an Ultimate Fighter winner who was undefeated at that time, had 1 or 2 wins in the UFC, and he could never fight again.
That's one of the big points of contention between him and Cody Garbrandt was that he ended Holdsworth's career.
Yeah.
So let's talk about building a career though, real quick, because
sure.
There's a podcast that at some point we're going to get to down the road that I want to launch called The Blueprint, and basically we talk about guys and the different paths their careers take and how to get to a championship and all that. So that's coming, guys. Listen for that on the Cageside Press podcast network. But when we look at Max Griffin, and again, I'm not saying that he's going to crack the top 15 or top 10 anytime soon, but when you say he digs deep, I mean, here's a guy, he's got Colby Covington in the rearview mirror, he's got Zaleski in the rearview mirror, he's got Mike Perry in the rearview mirror, Curtis Millender, Thiago Alves. So on the one hand, you have to find a good camp, but on the other hand, you got to take these fights that are going to turn you into something, right?
Yeah, I agree. Because of the moments where you're in trouble, you can dig deep. You have that comment. I mean, go back to the Brandon Davis, Randy Costa, and a perfect example, not to like foreshadow too much, is the main event, what Dustin Poirier did. Dustin Poirier had bumps in the roads coming up, but he grinded. He's been with American Top Team, so he's in the camp with Jorge Masvidal, Colby Covington, Thiago Alves, killers. You know, he's fought the best of the best while back in WEC, up in the UFC at featherweight, up in the UFC at lightweight, that when things started turning and looking bad, he was able to dig deep and go to a place that other fighters can't find. I don't know, and obviously Griffin did that against Imadaev. Poirier did that against Holloway, which makes it even more impressive when you do it against a guy like Max Holloway. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. So, all right, let's move on to Alexander Pontaja.
You skipped the 30-second knockout.
The Taha Salmon fight?
Yeah, I think that was actually before the Griffin Imadaev. I don't know.
Let's do that real quick because I wrote a little something up for it. Khalid, the Warrior Taha, was not setting the world on fire coming into his Saturday's fight with the interestingly named Boston Salmon. Salmon got his opportunity by looking good on Tuesday night, but on Saturday night, Taha sent him back to the drawing board with a left hook. Keith, this fight to me, Salmon thought the fight was stopped early. Did you?
No, I don't.
Yeah, it looked legit to me too.
It's one of those. Nolan King. I don't know if you're familiar with Nolan King. He's he has one of the best. When he talks about fights, every couple of weeks we have this. Was this fight stopped too early? Too early? He talks about it as being like a scale where this point is the perfect moment, but all these fit, and you can either be on the early side of a stoppage, you can be on the late side of stoppage. Then it gets into that's a bad stoppage, too late. That's a bad stoppage, too early. I think this falls into it's good, but on the earlier side of a stoppage. But I still think it falls into that scale of it being good. The one thing is, you got to feel for Boston Salmon. This is the guy. He was the first person to receive a contract on the Contender Series. He's had scheduled 3 UFC fights. He kept getting injured for 2 years. He's been waiting to make his UFC debut. He comes in and then he gets smoked in, I think, was it 25 seconds or whatever it was.
Quick.
Yeah, you got to feel for that guy. And heading into this fight, when I did tape study, Salmon was a guy that had a lot of buzz on him, especially because of his boxing background. I think he was like a 2 or 3 time national champion of boxing. They talked about on the broadcast that when he was an amateur, he was so so successful that he actually fought Errol Spence as an amateur, who's one of the best boxers alive right now.
Right.
And that's like how much they were buzzing this guy up. And when I looked at Taha, he was just a guy, like a card filler, like not even, I don't think he was even UFC level. And then to get knocked out. But what I loved at one point where DC broke down how the knockout was, and it just comes down to is more as the years the sport goes on, you realize that MMA striking is different than boxing striking.
Yeah.
And it's different. We really have our own style of striking. So while obviously boxing striking can be very successful in MMA, but they still have to make small adjustments. And if they don't, they're going to get knocked out. Like this, what happened right here. I mean, we've seen it with decorated boxers. Remember KJ Noons? He was at one point, I think he was top 10 in the world in one of the boxing weight classes, and he was getting knocked out by the Diaz brothers and by Nick Diaz and somebody
Crazy
else.
Horse Bennett put him on a highlight
Crazy
reel.
Horse Bennett, yeah, there you go, perfect. So, I mean, Gokhan Saki, one of the decorated kickboxer, world champion, this and that, got knocked out, one punch knocked out. I mean, it's a different. Yeah.
Well, there's more to it, and we'll have this conversation, I'm sure, somewhere down the road. But no, what I mean is there's more to the all of it. But just on a very simple level, when you have to defend your legs, it affects things. You can't sit down on your punches in the same way. Mm-hmm. So that's the 5-second explanation of much longer conversation. But
and you can't hide behind the big gloves.
Yep, absolutely.
The punches that land in boxing, the punches that land in MMA that wouldn't land in boxing, you only know it when you spar with boxing gloves and then spar with – you have to spar differently, but you spar with 4-ounce gloves or even the 6-ounce gloves. It's different. The punches that you land and don't land, the defense you use, it's very different. And every year that goes by, I think we're really starting to learn this.
Well, they say imitation is the best sign of flattery, and I think theft is the best sign of flattery, so I will be speaking to Nolan, who I've done some podcasts with as well. We will be stealing the Nolan King stoppage scale and expanding upon it. So from now on, I say we do 0 is perfect, -5 is early, +5 is late. And Nolan, you should be flattered, my friend. We're stealing your scale, and I think that's brilliant. So great job by Nolan.
I agree with it.
All right, let's move on to Alexander Pantoja. Much better the second time around on the pronunciation. Defeated Wilson Hayes by TKO via strikes in the very first round. Now, listen, Wilson Hayes has been around forever, fought for belts. You know what's funny? I was talking to somebody while I was watching the fight about how certain guys remind you of somebody, right? Like John Jones, Anderson Silva, and Israel Adesanya. Are they the same fighter? No, but they remind you of the same style of fighter. When I saw Pantoja, I was like, okay, I got Roger Huerta here. I got Eric Silva, just in look and in demeanor, a little bit in fights, right? And you think that they sometimes are on the same trajectory, and it's sometimes you fall into that trap, and it's not necessary. How'd Pantoja look? Is it more than just he found not a lucky punch, because I don't believe in that, but is it more than just he found the right punch? Is there more there?
I know I do. I mean, you're talking about a world-class BJJ guy. I think he's a guy who's just coming into his prime. He's just turned 28. That's or he's about to turn 29. I'm sorry. No, he's turning 29 next week. I mean, that's kind of where guys start finding their power. That's where they kind of really coming into their own. I mean, he's 5-1 in the UFC right now. His only loss was a close loss to Dustin Ortiz. I mean, he's good. And if you saw it right here, he's a much better athlete than Wilson Hayes. Wilson Hayes, I mean, he's shot-born. You can see it. I just looked up at Wilson. He's 34 years old, which is really surprising me because, like you said, he's been around forever. And he's got, 40 fights. He seems like he should be 44 years old. And what I wanted was this high scrambling jiu-jitsu match between, you got Hayes he won the Moondals. I mean, he's an elite grappler, in his prime. And we got what we kind of expected, though, was a kickboxing match where Pantoja is just a much better athlete right now. He got an open, he swarmed at it and made him pay. And it's a shame because the UFC is probably going to punish him Wilson Hayes is probably getting cut. And Pantoja is probably going to be forced to have to go up to bantamweight. And that's a shame because there's guys like Pantoja, guys like Formiga, even Joseph Benavidez, Alex Perez, Anthony Pettis. This guy, not Anthony Pettis, Sergio Pettis. There's these guys who are true flyweights that if they go up, as we saw with Holly, not everybody can move up a weight class and be successful. A lot of guys can, but there's a reason why there's weight classes. And I really hope the UFC changed their mind on the flyweight division, because a guy like Pantoja, he's really good. The hardcore fans love flyweights. You give casuals everything. You throw these interim titles out there because you think it's going to make casuals interested. You do everything for the casuals. Can you throw the hardcore something and give us our flyweights?
Well, that's what this podcast is for. That's why we started with the prelims, the hardcores. I mean, the hardcores are probably going to turn us off after we get to the main card.
Yeah.
But sorry, let's move on to Matt Frevola and Jalen Turner. Frevola defeated Jalen Turner again, kind of like Max Griffin a little bit. I just felt like it was a really professional fight on Frevola's part. Jalen Turner's green. He throws a lot of wild techniques. He loops his punches more so sometimes than he throws straight punches. And Frevola just found the grappling and sort of just took him out, man, like a professional.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned Max Griffin, because I felt the same way, that it was just a guy who stood by a game plan, stuck with it, and as the minutes went round, the game plan became more and more effective, because the takedowns became more effective, which made Turner start being offensive with the striking and get a little gun shy, and then that opened up Frevola's striking. Jalen Turner, obviously, I mean, you got a guy who's humongous. I still believe he's a guy that probably should go up to 172. That said, his wrestling is terrible. I mean, there was some positions where there was one time, I don't know if you remember this, I think it was late in the second period, he was sprawled out on top of Frevola, and Frevola was reaching for a single, and it's like, that's an easy just get back up, and he's still sprawled out, and somehow Frevola finished his single, and if you're any kind of amateur wrestling fan, he's a fish. I don't mean to say this like he would obviously kick my face into the stands, but when it comes to wrestling, Jalen Turner is one of the worst wrestlers in the UFC. I mean, he's terrible. There was some ugly takedowns that if he joined like a high school team, he looked like he'd be a JV wrestler.
Wow. All right. Well, these two aren't going, at least for the time being, too far in the division. So let's move on.